Enough is enough. Go home and stay home.
Tonight, the Prime Minister urges Canadians to continue physical distancing.
I have lots of news today, including information about our first cases that we found out about just this afternoon.
And the Yukon announces its second case of COVID-19. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Parliament Hill will reconvene tomorrow to pass emergency legislation to address the COVID-19 pandemic. This morning outside his Ottawa home, Justin Trudeau also warned about those who aren't taking the situation seriously. Jimmy Pashagumskum has this.
Trudeau's daily update contained a strong message to Canadians who aren't social distancing or self-isolating.
Enough is enough. Go home and stay home. This is what we all need to be doing. And we're going to make sure this happens, whether by educating people more on the risks or by enforcing the rules, if that's needed.
The Prime Minister warned that if people don't act responsibly, government may be forced to invoke the Emergencies Act. This evening, he is set to discuss the matter with premiers. Meanwhile, Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, announced there are almost 1,500 confirmed cases in Canada, with 102,000 people tested so far. With elders and the sick more at risk, Tam says people need to do their part.
Vulnerable populations and prevent an even greater acceleration of spread in high-risk settings, we need to continue with strict public health and infection control measures. But to further protect all of these populations, as well as our health system and all of our communities, we must slow community spread through unrelenting social distancing.
At today's COVID-19 Cabinet Committee meeting, ministers announced Canadian companies are being employed to produce medical supplies, to track the virus using artificial intelligence, while a company in Quebec is working on a potential vaccine. Trudeau is recalling the Senate and House of Commons tomorrow to pass emergency legislation in order to begin distribution of financial support for those who need it. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Nunavut remains the only Canadian jurisdiction without a positive test for COVID-19 virus. Now the territory has placed the most restrictive travel ban in the country in an effort to slow the spread of the virus to that territory. With the exception of some critical staff, only Nunavut residents will be allowed into the territory. All residents are expected to complete a 14-day isolation period before returning to Nunavut. The territory's health minister told residents if people don't follow the guidelines, more measures could be taken.
We have measures we can enact to patrol the streets if necessary. Penalties for individuals breaking public health orders can be as high as $50,000 or up to a year in jail. We have these powers, but our energy is better spent on planning and preparing to help the sick than chasing after rule breakers.
The Northwest Territories is taking extreme precautions over COVID-19. They shut down their border over the weekend, right before the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in the territory. Travel into the Northwest Territories is banned for non-residents by land, water, and air. Some individual communities are also restricting access. Exceptions will be made for territory residents and supply chain workers. Anyone returning or eligible to enter will have to self-isolate for 2 weeks in Yellowknife, Fort Smith, Hay River, or Inuvik. Those who disobey faced a $10,000 fine and 6 months in jail. Just 1 day after the Northwest Territories confirmed that first case of the virus, the Yukon's chief medical officer announced their first 2 cases of COVID-19. APTN's Chris McIntyre has more on this.
The announcement came at the latest COVID-19 briefing in Whitehorse.
I have lots of news today, including information about our first cases that we found out about just this afternoon.
The 2 Yukoners that contracted the virus went into self-isolation upon returning from a convention in the United States. Once aware of the possible infection, the couple went into self-isolation at home and are doing well. Yukon's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Brendan Hanley, said that as a result of taking early preventative measures, the risk of community circulation still remains low.
This is exactly what we were predicting as a likely first case in Yukon, and due to the containment and isolation, these cases do not change the risk to us, the public in Yukon. This case therefore illustrates the benefits of careful public health practice. good communication of risk, compliance with advice and direction from public health officials, and prompt detection of disease.
Further measures were announced. Dr. Hanley strongly advised to suspend all non-essential travel outside of the territory and to limit travel between rural communities. As of today, all bars shall remain closed, and starting March 25th, all personal establishments, including barbershops and nail salons, must close until further notice. All levels of government across Canada are looking at ways to monitor and to enforce things like social distancing and self-isolation. However, these measures don't necessarily mean you have to stay indoors. Come outside, enjoy the outdoors, but be aware of the space you put between yourself and other people.
Go outside for exercise, go outside for activity, go out on the land for hunting and trapping, but observe the principles of spacing as you go outside. And so don't go outside for socially, but go outside for being on the land, for connecting to the land and being active.
Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
And a number of First Nations are taking steps to monitor people coming and going from their territories. The chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations wants the province of Saskatchewan to do the same. Bobby Cameron is calling Premier Scott Moe calling on him to close that province's borders. Bobby Cameron joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Chief Cameron. You're calling on Premier Moe to close the Saskatchewan borders. Have you been in contact with the Premier?
Well, we've been exchanging some texts for sure, some communication, and they are actually the SAS party is going to be having an update here sometime this afternoon here in Saskatchewan. So we'll see what they say and what they decide. I'm sure they're looking out for the best interests of all of our people too. Yeah. Well, and the Prime Minister was asked about closing all provincial borders this morning. He said that it would be discussed in a conversation with premiers tonight. You support, why do you support the shutdown of the provincial borders? Well, first of all, the fact is there are hundreds and maybe even thousands of people that are unknowingly spreading this invisible enemy that we're battling with, COVID-19. And that's reality. And if we all don't do our part to limit it or decrease it or even stop the chance of it spreading, I think we're in a lot of big trouble. So I think we all have I know we all have a part to play in this. And as First Nation elected leaders, parents, grandparents, we all have a part, and it's just stay home. We can only travel when necessary for essential items, obviously. But we also have many members out there that are out of our province, out of our First Nations. So we give them time to come home for sure. How many of the 74 First Nations you represent have closed their borders, and who gets in and out of these places? I think we're sitting at about 10 right now, if not more. And what we're talking about is they've set up security at the entrances of their First Nation. I stopped at one this afternoon just to see what was going on. Sure enough, they stopped me and they said, "Who are you?" And just making sure people are being safe. They're coming in and out of our community. That was a good sign. But we need to do more of that for sure. How prepared are First Nations for the pandemic? Well, I will say this, Melissa, and to all the viewers out there, for many of us who have been taught and we listen to our knowledge keepers. We have knowledge keepers that have been telling us for decades, Melissa, that one day the First Nation people, we will have to go back to the way life was before any houses were built, before any settler or government arrived on these lands. We hunted, we fished, we trapped, we gathered. In our word, it's called Wagotuin, our relationship with the land. And perhaps this may be one of those times where First Nation people, we will have to go back off the land, live off the land. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us today. Thank you, Melissa. Let's all stay safe and stay healthy. Amid this pandemic, there are growing calls to decarcerate low-risk inmates and those awaiting remand, those in remand awaiting trial. We're going to tell you all about that when we come back from the break. First, here's tomorrow's weather for the east and central regions. On the east coast, we've got 4 and rain in Fredericton, 1 and snow in St. John's.
Happy Valley Goose Bay is 2 with some snow. Nain -1 and a mix of sun and clouds. Val d'Or 8 with Saint Jovite, mix of sun and cloud in those communities. Windsor's 9 degrees and mostly sunny skies. Sault Ste. Marie 4 and sunshine. 6 in snow or rain, for Sioux Lookout. 6 in sunshine for Thunder Bay. -3 in snow in the Pas. -1 in snow for God's Lake. Barons River and Princess Harbor 3 degrees and snow. +4 mix of sun and cloud in Brandon. 3 in snow for Saskatoon. 2 in snow for Regina. -8 with mix of sun and clouds for Buffalo Narrows. -14 and cloud for Uranium City. Welcome back. Montreal's municipal police force has declared a state of emergency in that city in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. The SPVM will create specialized teams to support officers enforcing Quebec's prevention guidelines, according to the public health law. Patrol officers now have the power to break up both indoor and outdoor gatherings. Those who refuse to comply with this social distancing protocol could be fined up to $100 or be arrested.
So what we ask for the people is to cooperate with us, and we ask for people who call 911 to be responsible and to give the more information possible to help to protect the police officers and to protect the citizens.
The majority of inmates in Canada's jails and prisons are First Nations, Métis and Inuit people. As the number of COVID-19 cases rises, there are some advocates worried that jails are the perfect place to spread this deadly virus. In an editorial published by APTN News Online this morning, Pam Palmater says one answer is to release some of the inmates. She joins us via Skype from Toronto. So the main point in the opinion piece that we ran on APTN News Online is that some people in jail or prisons should be released. Who do you think should be released?
Well, when you think about it, Indigenous peoples are grossly overrepresented in prisons. And we're only there because of, systemic racism and trying to navigate conditions of poverty, and then our own poverty is criminalized. So if you think of people in prison for things like panhandling or theft of groceries or theft of clothing. And I think we also have to consider how many Indigenous women are in prisons. I mean, it's the fastest growing prison population. Many of them are pregnant. Many of them are mothers. So we're really breaking up families. Now, there's a large category. In fact, the majority of people that are in prisons today are on remand, which means they're sitting in prison waiting for their trial. They haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. Mm-hmm. So imagine the deprivation of liberty and human rights if a massive COVID-19 outbreak is in these prisons, and these people are impacted or lose their lives when they really shouldn't have been sitting in prison anyway. Mm-hmm. And there's a large number also of low-risk people. So people who are in there for things like theft, but not any kind of severe violence to the public. So we're not talking about letting out serial killers. Mm-hmm. We're talking about people who present a fairly low risk to public safety.
You wrote that communities need to be involved, given the fear over the virus. How do you feel that communities would respond to people being sent home from jails or prisons?
Well, here's the thing. So communities need to be involved first and foremost in developing a decarceration plan that determines who is considered low risk. Mm-hmm. And then they have to be involved at the decision-making stage about what supports are needed for the people that are decarcerated. So many of them have homes to go to. They would just be going back to the homes or their families or communities that they were living in. Mm-hmm. While others were in prison for precisely the fact that they don't have homes. So you think about the homeless or people who are precariously housed. They need supports. They shouldn't have been in prison in the first place. They should have been supported. So First Nations communities and others in urban areas need resources to be able to help these people to be able to come back home and be under what's called a community of release, for example.
Mm-hmm. Are we seeing any movement towards this decarceration, the whole concept of it?
Yeah, in fact, we are. There are certain jails across the country who have decided to let go what they consider to be low risk. We don't know who's all in that category, people who are on remand, and they're also diverting people. So people that are currently before the courts are not being remanded into custody for smaller offenses. they're being given a trial date at another area. So I think that's really important. I mean, this is in line with what international recommendations are to use these alternatives. This is something that the Supreme Court of Canada, in fact, said, 20 years ago, that we should be looking at alternatives to prison, especially for Indigenous peoples. And the Justice Minister in Newfoundland has also said that they're going to come up with a plan to decarcerate some of these people, which includes things like early release, parole. So it's not just like opening the doors and everyone just runs out. It's a real strategy that's based on protecting public safety, but maintaining the health and human rights of Indigenous peoples in prison.
Well, and it only took a pandemic, I guess, for us to get moving on this. Thanks, Pam, for sharing your thoughts and for that op-ed that is on aptnnews.ca.
Thank you.
We want to hear what you think about the idea of decarcerating people from jails in light of this pandemic. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send us your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Just yesterday, Nova Scotia declared a state of emergency to slow the spread of COVID-19. Now, a Mi'kmaq community in the province is doing the exact same. Angel Moore brings us up to speed.
In response to the rising number of cases in Nova Scotia and people still gathering in groups, Eskazoni Chief and Council has declared a state of emergency yesterday, ordering people to stay in their homes. There's a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The 3 roads into the community are being monitored to keep visitors out. RCMP and security are patrolling the community to make sure the orders are enforced. This is all in an effort to lower the risk of the spread of COVID-19. Nova Scotia has confirmed 41 cases, the highest in Mi'kmaq. Prince Edward Island has 3 cases, Newfoundland Labrador has 4 cases, and New Brunswick has 17 confirmed cases. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabotuk, Halifax.
Thanks for that, Angel. In northwestern Ontario, a number of First Nations are taking their own steps to keep their communities safe from COVID-19. At least 15 First Nations are banning non-residents and visitors from entering their territories. Pickmorvert First Nation is prohibiting visits by non-residents except for deliveries of essential services and medical patients. Fort William First Nation is moving in the same direction. Chief Peter Collins announced that today on Facebook.
We will continue to make sure that our community members have the adequate supplies and resources to keep feeding their families and their friends. As always, we want to make sure that social distancing is imperative. They're saying 1 meter apart. If you can do that, and we'll get through this at the end of the day. Again, it's a challenging and very emotional time for all of us in the community.
Sunday was World Water Day, an important annual date for water protectors across Turtle Island. This year, though, some ceremonies looked a bit different. COVID-19 precautions saw community members practice social distancing yesterday. Organizer Wasekom encouraged people to use the hashtag WatersEdge2020 to share their experiences online instead of gathering in large groups.
This year, because of social distancing, we had to do it on our own, like sort of solitary. So it was very different in that sense. But the sort of community that we were able to build was very much online. And even though we're sitting at the water's edge, by ourselves, we did it in such a way where it was coordinated. So people from coast to coast could be there in the same time and space, being in ceremony and prayer. Even though you were alone, we were still together.
The clock is ticking down on an opioid addictions training center that's being evicted by the Alberta government. We'll tell you more about that after the break. And here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast for the west and the north. To northern Alberta, we got -11 in sunny skies for Fort Chip, -8 in cloud for Fort McMurray, -3 in snow for Calgary and Edmonton, -1 for Medicine Hat. 10s for Tofino and Campbell River with mostly sunny skies. Same with Bella Coola. Sandspit and Prince Rupert, sunshine and 8 degrees, -1 and sunny for Fort Nelson. Whitehorse, mix of sun and cloud, 3 degrees. Mayo, snow and 3. Wrigley, -1 and sunshine, -3 and snow for Norman Wells. 0 for Fort McPherson and mostly sunny skies. Polytech, -16 and sunshine. Baker Lake, -20 and sunny, -25 and sunshine for Repulse Bay. Joe Haven, -23 and snow. Resolute, -26 and clear skies. -16 and snow for Clyde River. Welcome back. Alberta's Nietzsche Institute was told by the Alberta government last year that they have to leave the building that they've taught students in for the past 45 years. The Nietzsche Institute offers training on opioid addiction and how to prevent and treat it. Now they have less than 2 weeks before they're evicted. APTN's Chris Stewart has the story.
In November, Alberta Indigenous Relations Minister Rick Wilson announced that the Poundmaker Lodge Treatment Centre would be expanding. More beds would be available to help treat people with addictions. However, the Nietzsche Institute is in the same building as Poundmaker, and Poundmaker will be using the space the Nietzsche Institute has occupied for over 4 decades. The Alberta government said they would find another location for Nietzsche. So far, no location has been found. Marilyn Buffalo is the CEO of the Nietzsche Institute.
We have been looking at all the options and what is available for us to into our new headquarters. So it's been a challenge. We haven't had anybody offering to give us a hand here in St. Albert or the city of Edmonton, which is kind of disturbing. But Nietzsche's been around for 45 years, and we aim to continue.
The Nietzsche Institute has graduated over 15,000 students during their history. NDP, Indigenous Relations critic, says it was a mistake to evict Nietzsche without a plan.
Now, the government has explained that they're trying to use the space in a good way, and of course I support the expansion of Poundmakers, but this is not the way you work with communities. This is not how you ensure that Indigenous voices are front and center and are respected by simply making arbitrary decisions, announcing them, and then telling people, well, we'll see what happens in the future.
The Alberta government says they can't comment on Nietzsche's situation as they are consulting with lawyers on the situation. As for the Institute's future, Marilyn Buffalo is hopeful for a solution.
We have to rely on the goodwill of the province, and we're still waiting for them to come forward and give us an offer of a place, because they only gave us 3 months notice before they evicted us, because we are a vital service.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We are all out of time for your news tonight. Be sure to check out our website for anything that you might have missed in the past few days. That's aptnnews.ca. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Take care of yourself.